Hello, my friend. I'm Aimee Esther, and I live with multiple chronic illnesses. And today I wanted to talk about Hailey Bieber's story. She had a scary thing happen, went through a little bit of a period trying to figure out what was going on with her health.
I had a very scary incident on March 10th. And all of a sudden I felt this really weird sensation that kind of traveled down my arm from my shoulder all the way down to my fingertips. Justin was like, "Are you okay?" And I couldn't speak. The right side of my face started drooping. I couldn't get a sentence out. Everything was coming out not even jumbled, just couldn't get any of the words out. So obviously immediately I thought I was having a stroke.
And I'm just going to recap what happens next. You're welcome to go watch her whole video. I'll link it down below. But essentially, she had a medic where she was. I don't know if she was on tour with her husband or what she was doing, but she had a medic there, was able to come look at her, and then, of course, went to the ER. And by the time she got to the ER, her stroke symptoms had gone away and she was feeling a lot better. And so she was really confused and didn't know what was going on because at that point it seemed like things had resolved. But of course, that'd be really scary if you have symptoms of a stroke, even if they go away. That's still very, very scary to know what was happening. Is it going to happen again? It sounds pretty terrifying.
So basically, they did some scans and they were able to see that I had suffered a small blood clot to my brain, which they labeled and categorized as something called a TIA. I'm going to try to put the definitions of everything I talk about under here so that I don't butcher it. Basically, it's like having a mini stroke. It definitely feels like having a stroke.
It's so hard to know when a doctor tells you, "You have this thing and I'm going to explain it to you." And it's like, you think you know what it is, but you really don't. So I'm glad she put that up for us.
When I was in the emergency room, they kept me overnight. They did tons of tests. They did blood tests to see if I had a clotting disorder or if I had an autoimmune disease, or they did everything.
So they did tons and tons of tests on her and came up with nothing. And they kind of give her this explanation that, oh, it's a combination of these things that have happened, your birth control, and a few other things that were just all at the same time. So it must have been just a combination of all of those that it happened. And I feel like this is so common that doctors are doing their best. They are trying their hardest. They only are human and they only know so much. But it's hard because we who are feeling the symptoms, it's hard when you don't have a direct answer. Like, this is exactly what's wrong with you. And this test came back positive. So you have this condition or this disease. It's like, for me, for the longest time, I struggled to get a diagnosis and I didn't even care what it was. I was like, just tell me. I don't even care if it's serious. Of course I would if it actually was. And it was something life-threatening or something. Of course, I didn't want something like that. But at the moment, I was like, I don't even care what it is. I just want to know what's wrong with me. I just feel crazy because I'm having all these symptoms. This thing's happening. I just want to know why it's happening so I can stop it. And if I can't stop it, at least I know what is going on. At least I know what's happening to me. And doctors are doing their best. They really are. They are working so hard. They are human beings, though, that still make mistakes and still don't know everything. And so they are giving you their best guess. And it's frustrating when you can't get a direct answer. It's one of those things that I just wish I could have right when I want it because I'm impatient and I just want to know. And I'm sure for her at this time, she just wanted to know what was wrong. So after she went home from the ER, she kept searching for answers. She went back to other doctors, other specialists, and said, I need to figure out what happened. And I've definitely experienced times with my chronic illness where it just didn't feel right. I just felt like we hadn't fully had the picture. I remember when I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, I was like, yeah, this explains some of my symptoms. It totally explains a piece of the puzzle, but there's an extra piece that we're missing. And I just felt like something was missing. And so I kept going. I kept searching. And you just have to keep going. And even if you, like me, ran out of money and didn't have the resources to keep going, I waited a few years. I kind of just dealt for a couple years and saved up and then started going again. And I just had to advocate for myself. And so that is what she does. She luckily was able to immediately go to some new doctors, try some new tests, and we'll see what they find.
So when I went down to UCLA, we did some more in-depth testing. And when I went there, they did something called a transcranial Doppler, which is basically a much more accurate test to find a PFO. So I did this test, and they actually found that I had a grade 5 PFO, which is the highest grade that you can have. So mine was fairly large. So the recommendation from my doctors at UCLA was to have a procedure done called a PFO closure. Recently got the PFO closure done, and it went very smoothly. I'm recovering really well, really fast. We're able to get it closed, that I will be able to just move on from this really scary situation and just live my life.
I'm so happy for her that she was able to figure it out. But I think it's so common that people who live chronically ill and have health issues, especially chronic health issues, that you go get a test, it's negative, and a doctor says, checked that off the list. We tried that. We checked for it. That was negative. You don't have it. Let's move on. And there definitely could be error. There could be human error in the doctors or nurses or whoever is looking at the blood tests, whatever. In between, there could be mix-up. There could be so many reasons for error, which is so hard because, again, everyone's doing their best. I'm doing my best at advocating for myself and showing up to my doctors. My doctor's doing their best at trying to figure out what's wrong with me. And we're all just humans trying to figure this out. And there could be so many reasons that a test could come back abnormal or normal. And it can be really hard to find an answer when your doctors have marked something off the list, but what if you did have that? You just had a different form of it, or you weren't flaring at that time, so the test didn't come up positive. It's just so hard to know. And at what point do you stop going? What point do you stop getting tests? It's such a hard balance. It's so hard to know, and especially when things get expensive and time consuming, it's hard to know at what point do you keep trying things, because I've definitely had experiences where I get tested for something, it comes up negative, and then I go to a new doctor and they say, well, that could have been a false negative, let's test again. Still negative. Then I go to another doctor, like, well, let's test again. And I will get tested multiple times for the same thing, and it always comes up negative. And it's just like, I don't know what is wrong with me. And the diagnosis process is so hard. And I think one of the hardest things is when you have zebras versus horses. So if you've heard this analogy, doctors are taught to look for horses, which are common, which are more likely to be there, and look at zebras last. And it makes sense because the majority of people having certain symptoms will have the more common thing, and it'll be a small percentage of us who have the more rare thing. And so those things are left to the end. They're left to wait until we've tried everything else first. So if you're having issues with blood sugar, they're probably going to check for diabetes first. And they'll test you for that because that's the most common thing. But yours might be completely unrelated to diabetes, but you're having similar symptoms. If you have a more rare case, which is called a zebra, the rare thing that's not as common to see, it can take a lot longer to find that. And it sounds like that is Hailey Bieber's case, where yeah, all of these other factors could have caused this mini stroke that she had, but she had this more rare, this zebra that was kind of hiding, that was hard to find. And it can be really hard when it feels like doctors don't believe you. And they say, oh, it's just stress. Oh, it's just depression. Not that those things are easy, but that you're having all these symptoms that you know are more severe, you know are causing problems in your everyday life, and yet a doctor doesn't believe you because the test comes back negative. And I think we need to follow Hailey Bieber's ways and her advice, which is to keep pushing and keep advocating for yourself if you don't feel right about the treatment that you've gotten, if you don't feel right about your diagnosis or your lack of diagnosis, to keep going. Because even though doctors are doing their best, and some are amazing and some aren't so great, and there's everything in between, whether you have an amazing doctor or one that's not so great, they're all just guessing. They're all just trying to figure this out too. And you might need to keep looking. You might need to keep pushing. And even if you don't have the resources, I encourage you to keep believing in yourself, because the most important thing is that you believe you. Because when you stop believing you, that's when you're going to have problems. I had a huge time in my life where I just thought, I'm crazy. All these tests came back negative. Doctors say there's nothing wrong with me. I must be crazy. It must be all in my head, right? And if I hadn't of pushed those thoughts aside and kept going and kept pushing and kept reminding myself, no, this pain is real. This symptom is real. I feel this and it affects my life every single day. I wouldn't have found the answers that I had. So if you are searching for answers and you're struggling and you're hearing my story or Hailey's story and you're frustrated because you're like, I just want to get there. I just want to be there where I have my answer and I can look back and say, yeah, I went through this, but now I have my answer. I want to tell you to keep going. And even when it gets hard, let yourself have a breakdown. Let yourself cry about it. Feel all the emotions, but then get up and keep going, because you will find answers if you keep on pushing. And maybe you need to do some research yourself. Maybe you need to try to figure some stuff out on your own and take that information to your doctors to try to solve your problem, because it can be so hard. We're all just doing our best out here. We're all just trying to make it by. So I'm sending prayers and love that you will find your diagnosis if you haven't already. And I will link Hailey's video down below where you can watch the whole thing. But I'm grateful that she found an answer, and I'm hoping that you will as well. If you live chronically ill and have extra pain and fatigue, make sure you're subscribed to my channel so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos, and I'll see you on the next one.